Emotional algebra, where the heart meets the math. What is integral is derivative as you figure out your path. Power plus emotions equals more than you can see. Listening to the wisdom of our host, Dr. E. Emotional Algebra with Dr. E.
Welcome to Emotional Algebra with Dr. E. Emotional Algebra is a podcast that helps listeners to understand the subtle calculations people make every day in their relationships with others. It's a podcast to help us all become better people through understanding the different variables that drive our behaviors. I'm your co-host, Andrew Tavani.
And I'm Dr. E.
And Dr. E, we are back with a new episode. We've had a couple in a row now in which we've had guests joining us.
Mm-hmm.
No guest today, but in some ways, something better than a guest, a classic Dr. E graphic, which is one of my favorite parts of the show.
Oh my God, classic. Jeez, I feel honored.
Absolutely.
But yeah,
classic
yeah.
Classic in terms of this podcast, which we've done many episodes now. I mean, I think you were saying before we're close to 2 dozen. So, and we haven't seen one in quite some time. So I'd say, classic graphic.
Yeah, well, we started at first 10 episodes. I think 10 episodes straight had graphics included in those just to help. So I figured it was time. What I wanted to do is in building this was help introduce the concepts, then bring some guests in, and then start to talk about some of these concepts of emotional algebra with different people in different situations, and then come back to it to really, now people are seeing through the discussions the different ways that we look at that concept, as I say, of emotional specificity, that we're going to dive into that. However, before that, we have a little event time-wise in the calendar coming up. That is the Super Bowl, right?
That is true. So this is Super Bowl week that we're recording this, and it's a big week for me because I'm an Eagles fan. So Eagles in the Super Bowl, and then you're holding up what looks like not quite the Lombardi Trophy. What kind of trophy is this?
This is our Super Bowl trophy. Every year, this is Super Bowl 10. We've been having it longer, but had to miss some years due to illness, COVID, things like that. So, but yeah, this is Super Bowl 10. This is the trophy that I made. So everybody who comes to the party is part of a family. They bring their best pot of soup. One year, we actually had people bring 2.
Wow.
So you bring your best pot of soup and everybody tastes it and everybody votes for the favorite soup. And we've had a lot of really amazing different recipes. It's been so much fun.
Now, how does this work? Is it sort of like a blind vote? How you're tasting all the soup, or is it just, do you give your vote right there? Like, what's to stop you from voting for your soup, Dr. E?
If people want to vote for their soup, that's up to them. I mean, it's all in the honor. So I have a cup and then I have poker chips. Everybody gets 3 poker chips. So everybody votes for 3 soups.
Okay.
And they fall into the cup. And then, so then when we're done, we lift up the cup, we count the chips. And then, but yeah, if people want to vote for they want to stack their own cup, that's fine. But
let me understand something. That trophy you just held up, what happens? The winner gets to take that trophy home for a year and then they come back the next year to try to defend the title?
No, they just get to hoist it for a picture. So they get to hold this up for a picture, okay. and then so
it's not like the Stanley Cup where you go and hold that thing for a year and then.
No, I should have written like in crayon all the winners' names. You
can get that engraved, Dr. E. It's not too late. Now here's
it's all plastic too. Label maker, maybe. There we go. The label maker,
I'm sure you can figure something out. It's 2025. How many times have you won the Super Bowl?
We don't compete. We don't play home soil. Yeah. Wow. So we usually will supply something else to eat for people who might not want soup. So we might have chicken tenders or stuff for kids and things who might be there and don't want to eat the soup. So dips, drinks, we provide everybody else. All they have to do is bring the soup and eat the soup and get full and vote for the soup and then watch the game.
And what are some of the winning soups that you can remember? Name some big soups that pulled off a Super Bowl win.
There was a pho that won one year. There was a lot of Asian soups. We had a spicy Asian shrimp soup one year. Um, I think we did chili one year. My favorite one of all time was this beer cheese soup that I had to get the recipe for because it was so.
Yeah.
There was also like a really good chili that was more cheese than chili almost, and a lot of meat. But that one was good. So yeah, every year's a new surprise.
Wow. So people really, they bring out their A game for the Super Bowl, huh?
They do, and
Yeah.
that's what it says in the invite. Bring your A game.
Is that
You
right?
know,
Yeah.
for
How about that?
yep,
That's
yep.
fascinating, Dr. E. We could probably talk about this for 30 minutes. And
Yeah,
now I'm
well,
all
I gotta
hungry.
put
Now
a
you got me
service mark.
hungry.
I gotta put a little service mark after Super Bowl, a little SM after that. So,
Yeah.
uh,
Trademark that thing.
yeah,
You just
yeah,
start
yep.
licensing it out. Let everyone have their Super Bowl party, and they can pay you a fee.
There you go.
Now you've got me all hungry too. That beer cheese soup. That sounds like perfect Super
It
Bowl
doesn't My
fare.
mouth is
And
literally watering.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
Okay.
I
Well,
think I'm
before
gonna
you get
stop
me,
eating until Sunday.
yeah. Before I get all into the soup, I may have to fly down there, Dr. E, and get some of this soup. Um, let's get back into why we're here today. Let's talk about
Right.
the name of the podcast, Emotional Algebra with Dr. E. We're gonna drill down a little into emotions, into
Mhm,
emotional specific emotions and what they mean and what they do. Uh,
mhm.
Go ahead, tell us a
Right.
little
All
more.
right. All right, so let's go ahead and launch on in back to the PowerPoint. So, where we're talking about is first, we want to understand what are emotions there to do. Often in our life, we really aren't taught why emotions are there. We know that they're just there. To me, the first language that we use is emotion. We don't have words. We don't have understanding of a lot. We just exist. And to me, emotions are there to help us first to survive and to exist and then thrive and succeed, and they help us to interact with the world in many ways, and that's really why our conscious mind comes into being. So if we go back to our emotions and what they're there to do for us, emotions are there to show us things, tell us things, teach us things, do things for us, or help us do things for ourselves. So what I want people to think about is an emotion has a singular specific purpose. Often when we're looking at multiple purpose of an emotion, we're combining different emotions together. And often people combine different emotions together and don't realize it. And that's again why I get into the idea of the algebra, the relationships between, is one emotion multiplicative to another one, or is it additive, or is it negative? Often we want to negate fear and or sadness and or guilt, sometimes with an anger or a rage or a hatred. And we'll get back why that happens in a little bit. But look at each emotion as having a singular purpose and what it might do. So an emotion is going to either show us something, or teach us something, or tell us something. So look at it that way. So as we move forward, I see, and we've talked about this before. These are things that I've touched on before, but now we're bringing it all together under one roof, as we'd say, under one episode. So the three core emotions that I see are love, fear, and pain. All other emotions are derivatives. Now, in some episode in the future, we're going to get into quantum physics, and we're going to talk about why I view love, fear, and pain as the three core emotions, and actually take that to the level of quantum physics and energy to really see that in the universe, all these things are overlapping. And we can look at it that way. And to me, it really made the universe make a lot more sense to me. It helped emotions make a lot more sense to me. And so just stay tuned to future episodes for that, fans. Now, what's the purpose of love? Well, it lets us know when we feel an affiliation, an attraction, or closeness towards oneself, another, and or even things. So that helps us to feel connection. Love brings us together. And I say love can feel like and is the most powerful emotion, while it can also feel like the weakest emotion, depending on how it is used. If it is used to bring us together and we feel that closeness, nothing defeats love. If we use it to exploit, manipulate, to affect people's perceptions of power, and therefore evoke other emotions that might be fear-based emotions and or pain-based emotions in combination with love, then often we want to hide love behind defenses, attitudes, beliefs, behaviors, Those are the things that are going to affect our use of love. Fear seeks to prevent us from doing things that could harm us and seeks ways to protect us. So, fear-based emotions, every fear-based emotion is going to ask us, do I need to protect myself in some way? Am I protecting myself in some way? But fears often might call in other fear-based emotions to try to help with that decision. And like I said, we'll look at that in a little bit. But its job is to say, do you need protection? So often fear is going to be present or future oriented. It's going to call on the past to help it make decisions, and often beliefs, emotions, behaviors, all those things we talked about in the self-development episode. But it's going to, like I said, say, what do I need to do to protect myself? So it is survival based. That's what the purpose of fear is. Wonderful emotion. Sadness is the emotional version of pain. But there are pain-based emotions. Just like we have different levels of physical pain and different types of physical pain, we also have different types of emotional pain. And pain is there to teach us. Pain is there to let us know when things are wrong. Pain might call on fear, and fear often wants to avoid pain. So when we look at the interaction between those emotions and how they play off each other, then again, we start to make more sense of ourselves. We start to make more sense of the world. We start to see why people are doing what they're doing. Again, this goes back to that whole idea of emotional algebra and understanding those variables and how they work together. So the key part of that, again, is to see that idea of how those specific nature of each pain-based emotion, of each fear-based emotion, of each love-based emotion. I would say almost each emotion has its own spectrum of color or spectrum of sound. So we're looking at the spectrum of the range of those emotions and what they're there to do for us, to show us, tell us, teach us, help us do for ourselves. All right, so emotional specificity. We have protective emotions. Now, I'm jumping into this because the reason I say this is that protective emotions never come first and never come alone. However, I wanted to cover these before I got into the other emotions because they come up so often. And often when I ask people about emotions that you'll see are protective, they often think that that's the only thing they feel, and they often think it's the first thing that comes up. So we have a lot of lack of understanding of the emotions, of why they're there, and what they're doing. So protective emotions are, and these emotions are pain-based and fear-driven. What does that mean? That to me, all protective emotions come from a place of pain. And yet fear drives those emotions. So fear and fear-based emotions will call protective emotions and or protective cognitive defenses into place. So what do I mean by cognitive defenses? We often try to use thought to protect us. I think men are more socialized and have been more socialized to use logic and then emotion to protect themselves because we're socialized to want to be seen as strong. So any people who are socialized to be strong might start first with their protective logical defenses and then move to their emotional defenses. So logical defenses are rationalization, justification, minimization, denial, projection, projective identification, logical processes like that try to keep emotions at bay. Then we're often, when we pierce that veil and that's not working for us, then we're going to move to these protective emotions. Irritation is minor. Irritation says, ow, something's bothering me. Irritation is like an itch or a bug. And what do we do when we feel a bug? We want to swat it. What do we do when we feel itch? We want to scratch it. And if it keeps itching, we scratch it more. So even we do that with people. When we start to feel irritated with them, what do? We say, back off. So it's kind of the warning. It's the indicator in a soft level to say, okay, you're getting on my nerves. And again, so we have to realize a lot of these emotions and protective emotions come in layers, just like the intensity of emotions. So when we get into physics, we're going to talk about amplitude. We're going to talk about volume. We're going to talk about wavelengths. Again, future episode. But the amplitude of that emotion is going to be indicative of the intensity of that feeling, of the volume of that emotion and how much affecting us. So irritation, protective wise, is on the mild, it's on the low volume level. we move to anger. Anger protects us when we feel threatened. So as we really feel a threat, we might bring out anger, say, back off, right? Or we might often maybe swing at somebody in some way. It's not going to be a full-on brawl or a punch, but it's going to be a push. It might be a slap. It might be something like that. So it says, back off. I need protection.
Dr. E, it's always are you saying it's a physical
No,
sort of
no.
outburst or more of a verbal?
So the emotion is calling on us to respond. So anger, rage, hatred, all these emotions that we're going to get into are calling on us to behave. The behavior in the response to the intensity of the emotion that says, I feel threatened, act on this. So that's why I say protective emotions are there to do something for us. All these emotions that I'm going to go over are there to do something for us. And that is to keep us from getting hurt, to get people to back off, to elicit fear and or threat in the person on the other side. They might be behaved on in a way that could be yelling. It could be making a face. It could be a growl. It could be a slap. It could, again, so that's where we're looking at the intensity and then how the intensity
So it could
changes.
it could manifest in sort of a range of intensity there. Got it.
Right. And for one person, anger might be slapping somebody. For another person, it might just be the look,
The
So
death
that's
stare.
where we want to,
Yeah.
exactly. So that's where we might want to understand that person's temperament, their history, what are their dichotomies. That's why I go into talking about dichotomies, because people who want to look strong are much more likely to express their protective emotions. People who want to look good are more likely to hide them, and they might express their anger. Like somebody goes, oh my gosh. I remember somebody who they used to go like this. And when they started biting their lip, it was time to get ready, because anger inside was building and seething. And even seething, I could put on this list, because that to me is that anger that's bubbling. It's getting to the point of blowing. So, and that might come out as anger or rage. So rage protects us when we feel in fear of our life and or our integrity feels threatened. And that's huge. So again, understanding the differences in these emotions, the specificity, the uniqueness. So when I'm getting to people and saying, why did you blow it up there? Because often people feel like their integrity is constantly feeling threatened. So people with low levels of confidence inside, people who really have a hard time believing in themselves, they might be quicker to rage because they feel like when people make a jab at them or stab at them, that it's affecting their integrity. Life is another thing. People with trauma and histories of trauma might react with rage, and we're like, what's wrong with you? Well, because that sense of perceiving trauma and terror, so the intensity of the emotion underneath, remember that whole conflict escalation discussion we had in a previous episode. Well, the more perception of loss of power I feel inside, then the more I've got to react to compensate for that, to equal that out, to find that level of where do I find balance on the teeter-totter. So that's where intensity of emotion is going to be related to, of the protective emotion is going to be related to the intensity of the perceived loss of power and those emotions that indicate to us that we're losing power. So hatred tries to protect us by pushing us away from situations that have caused us pain, are causing us pain, and or could cause us pain. So hatred is past, present, and future oriented. And it's so if we look at hatred, I talk to people about hatred a lot, because hatred doesn't have to come out in an aggressive way. Hatred doesn't have to say, I hate you. Hatred can just be, hey, don't come near me. Just stay away. Hatred, often when kids say, I hate math, it's stupid. They don't hate math, and math isn't stupid. They feel stupid when they take their math class, and therefore they hate that feeling that they have, because it's not just stupid that they feel when they're taking their math class or they're writing or whatever thing that they hate. Hatred is saying, get me away from this, or I'm going to get you away from this because it has caused you pain. Exposing yourself into the present will cause you pain. And the more that you continue to experience, the belief is it will continue to cause you pain. So why would I want to do something that continues to cause me pain? That can be a really adaptive relationship, our emotion in a relationship. Sometimes we overwhelm our pain with that feeling that I should love this person because, well, and yet that person's abusing you. Yeah, but I love them. So hatred might be saying, get them away. Well, at the point at which hatred builds over time, because now I have the history of feelings of hate over time, and it says, this isn't working for me. Get me away from this person. Sometimes it might come out with other emotions like rage. Hatred can come out with anger. So again, even with us, we're saying that these protective emotions can come out with other emotions. Arrogance protects us with a shield of false pride. I call people out on that all the time because they want to feel like they feel proud or they feel confident, but arrogance covers up. Again, it's protective, but it looks like confidence. It looks like pride. It often wants to overextend in areas where we haven't developed competence and or true confidence. So then we extend it into those areas. And that's where we want to look at, like I said, our culture, talked about in the past, tends to have narcissistic traits to it, that many people with narcissistic traits continually use arrogance. And they use it to expand, and extend their feelings of dominance, really to protect themselves. And it often can be about intimidating others to create a sense of fear, apprehension, doubt, confusion. So it's meant to evoke emotions of weakness, perceived weakness in others. So as I'm talking about these, remember, this isn't talking about the hierarchical purpose of emotions. I'm talking about the hierarchical uses of these emotions. I'm talking about the equity-based purpose of each emotions, that they all exist for a purpose and a reason. And that's what this discussion is primarily about. So now we have flippancy. Flippancy protects us with the shield of not caring. So for parents out there, when your kid says, I don't care, what is the purpose of that? Well, if I don't care, then I don't feel. If I don't feel, then I don't hurt. If I don't hurt, then you can't hurt me. If you can't hurt me, I can't lose. If I can't lose, then I must win. So there is an extension of logic behind the use of flippancy. And frankly, flippancy is supposed to be there to look like we don't feel. And if as a parent, we feel like our kids don't feel, then guess what? We don't feel like we can use pain-based interventions to intervene, or even logic-based intervention. So what happens is parents up it. They up the ante to maybe anger, to the yelling, to the screaming, to maybe even rage-based things, because now the parent's integrity of that ability to parent, teach, guide that child feels compromised. So then they might call on rage. I'll show you. And that's sometimes where then you can have abuse happen as well. When the parent loses control, they feel a loss of power. They feel helpless inside and maybe hopeless and failure and shame and guilt and humiliated and embarrassed. All the feelings they're bringing in. What happens with their power inside? What happens with their power on the outside? They're calling these protective emotions. So realize when your kid uses flippancy, they're trying to protect themselves. Defiance helps me hold on to my power. So that says you can't have it. You can't make me. That's just saying you can't have my power. I'm not going to surrender any more of that power. And kids do that a lot. You can't make me do my homework. Adults, we do that a lot, and that's where we get in a lot of these conflicts. Again, if we stopped and look back and remember that these emotions are coming to protect me, therefore they didn't come first. And they're not coming alone. They're coming with other emotions, and they're bringing those deeper fear-based emotions with them behind what I'm showing to the world. That's important to understand. So realize these protective emotions and maybe make notes of them. Sarcasm uses humor. It's an aggressive humor to protect. So often makes comments about other people, maybe about the way they're dressed or what they said, or the tone that they have can be a sarcastic tone. It's meant to protect us in making kind of a semi to non-threatening comment that isn't directly aggressive. Yet it does have an aggressive tone to it, and basically says, back off or I'll destroy you with my words. So then what happens when somebody uses sarcasm? Often then, if the other person plays the victim, so again, we're calling in all these previous episodes now, if they play the victim and they're saying, look what you did to me, then the person who uses a sarcastic comment says, what's the matter? Can't you take a joke? I was just kidding. which then has the other person feeling disarmed. How it just says to the person who's playing the victim that you can't take it. I'm just playing. And that way they often then feel doubly potentially embarrassed, shamed, humiliated by the comment and then by the reaction through sarcasm. So sarcasm protects on the front end in the delivery and on the back end in how it's then responded to. If you say, "What's the matter? I was just kidding." And those
So,
are key pieces to look at.
so Dr. E, I mean, if
Mhm.
sarcasm, it almost sounds like it's an efficient emotion, as you're saying, it works on the front end and the back end. Are you also saying that it's not, is it something people should avoid using? I know some people like sarcasm and like sort of joking around, but are you saying that it's not sort of a healthy thing to be doing?
Yeah, no, it's not. I catch myself in using sarcastic comments at time, and I often call other people up because there's a difference between humor and sarcasm. Humor often doesn't have to come at the expense of another. Sarcasm often purposely comes at the defense of another. And like I said, it can be very invasive and almost nebulous, because it often has people questioning, what do they mean by that? So it can be slowly disarming. You can see people who slowly ratchet up their use of sarcasm. And it's kind of like sometimes they're feeling out their audience to say, how far can I go with this? I don't know if you've ever had your kids, but I know there have been times that my daughter got to points where she would push with comments and I'd be like, okay, that one crossed the line, So they're trying to challenge that fear-based respect, as well as I think a love-based respect, but they're trying to challenge how far can I go to challenge respect? How far can I go to challenge this person's power? Are they going to stand up for themselves? And that's, like I said, where sarcasm can erode our relationships over time. And that's really what I want to look at. So if you're a person, I have a lot of people saying, well, I use sarcasm all the time. And then we'll go back and we'll look at their history. Why did you start using sarcasm? Well, my family used it. And how did they use it? And then we talk about its use and we say, do you see here where you're using this really to protect yourself? You're using this because you feel that it sends out this message, and often they get it, but sometimes it's a deep dive because people don't want to feel guilt and or responsibility about the emotions they're using to protect themselves. Because guess what? If I acknowledge that I use an emotion to protect myself, it also acknowledges that I'm feeling weak and or vulnerable. And that then says that I feel a loss of power. And people in hierarchical models do not want to acknowledge this loss of power. So none of these emotions do I really want people to use. While I'm often teaching people in our hierarchical world, you may have to or feel in a position to use these emotions, while often these are indicators to step back and look at, why am I wanting to use this emotion? What's underneath?
Interesting, Dr. E. A lot to take in there, and a great graphic here. People might want to just take a screenshot of that so they can make some notes later or refer back to it later.
So now I'm going to ask you quiz time, Andrew. All right. We're going to go through some other emotions. Remember that all of our pain-based emotions are, all of our protective emotions are based in what emotion? Love, fear, or pain?
Pain.
And they're driven by what emotion?
Fear.
Perfect. Okay. And all the fear-based emotions. So that's, again, what we remember is we're not just talking about fear, pain, or love. We're talking about a spectrum of each emotion. So that's where we're going to get in here. So I wanted to see if you can tell me if these emotions I'm going to show you are fear-based, pain-based, or love-based.
So not only a classic graphic today, but a classic pop quiz for me.
Exactly. And I have not showed you these. We talked about before. So this is just real quick. So failure.
Failure is pain.
Right. So remember, pain-based emotions are there to often teach us things, to let us know when something's wrong, to let us know it might be time to learn or grow. Because when we learn, guess what? We grow stronger. We heal. So pain often helps us, and pain-based emotions are there to help us to heal and or grow stronger. Yet often people want to avoid pain-based emotions because they experience that pain. And fear says, avoid pain. No, fear and pain are working together if we see it in collaboration. Pain-based emotions don't necessarily want us to experience them either. They want to say, if you learn from this, then things can get better. So, stupid.
Stupid is, I would say, fear based.
Fear, why?
Because maybe you've felt stupid in the past and you fear feeling stupid again in the future. That's just my guess.
So realize what you just said. You fear feeling stupid. Therefore, stupid is also
So a pain and fear then.
no. See, this is perfect because now we're getting into that specificity. The fear of feeling failure, the fear of feeling stupid is a fear-based emotion that says avoid pain.
Right.
Stupid is failure times X. So whenever we feel multiple feelings of failure, stupid is there to say we have, like it says, we feel multiple failures and it wants us to assess each one to see what we can learn. Either collectively, we're doing the same thing over and over, and or individually, we've tried a bunch of different things and none of them have worked. So we still have more to work on. So both of those emotions are saying there's more to work on. There's more to learn. So the intersection between failure is failure early in life to me between failure and stupid is it's failure plus failure impacts stupid. As we get older, I think it feels like failure times failure then becomes more multiplicative is how we equate stupid, even to the point of where it can become exponential. So failure to the fifth, because I have done this so many freaking times and I feel so stupid because failure is there. So again, that interaction between those emotions is critical to understanding the algebra. And even then, when we feel failure, it's never going to come alone, especially when we feel stupid. That's never going to come alone because it's often going to come with other emotions. And we'll keep going here. So next emotion, overwhelmed.
Overwhelmed. Does not feel like love. I'm going to say fear again.
Okay, why?
Well, now that you're asking me that, I'm thinking it might be pain because if
Think
you're
about when you
overwhelmed,
felt overwhelmed. Yeah, what is overwhelmed? What do you feel when you feel overwhelmed?
you feel sort of helpless or hopeless.
Okay, so
Even if it's
now you
brief.
just introduced. See, now you say when you feel overwhelmed, you feel helpless, probably, and hopeless. So you feel both emotions. So again, emotional specificity.
Yes.
People aren't ferreting out and teasing out those separate emotions. Overwhelmed to me is almost a visceral feeling. I can feel heavy. I can feel drained. I might feel fear and terror might come in when I feel overwhelmed and want to make me run. So overwhelmed often we can fall into learned helplessness and give up, and or we might want to run like heck. Okay. So as we look at overwhelmed, it is there to, like I said, let us know when we have too much information, too many emotions, too many experience, and it wants to sort those things out and get some distance, not run away, but it says, give me some distance so I can evaluate each of these variables. I often use the example of how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So when I talk about overwhelmed, somebody's looking at that whole elephant. They're going, how in the heck am I going to eat this? You know? So it says, let's look at our different belief systems, our attitudes, all of our different emotions, our perceptions of the past, our perceptions of the future. So as we break those down, we can solve that problem much more easily. Like I said, overwhelmed is never going to come alone. It's going to come with failure. It's going to absolutely come with stupid. Because when we feel multiple failures, that's when often it almost calls on overwhelmed, yet it's different. Okay? Because overwhelmed says, I need to look at each one of these things, where stupid is saying, now let's learn from these situations. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. And just to be clear, so overwhelmed is which is it, a fear-based or pain-based emotion? Or is it both?
You tell me.
I don't know.
You tell me. It's pain-based.
It's pain-based.
pain-based.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So I think I'm 1 for 3 on the quiz right now, Dr. E.
Well, and that's the thing to see, is that's why, again, I do this exercise because it's really important to tease out these different emotions to see the relationships. Happiness.
Happiness, I'm going to go with love.
Absolutely. So it lets us know when things feel enjoyable, life is working in favor. So it's a gauge. It says, hey, things are going well. Now, the issue we often see, and I think we talked about this on the conflict episode, is people look happy all the time. Often we feel like there's something wrong with them. Often people feel jealous and or envious of people's feelings of happiness. And that's important to look at too, because they often want to try to take away or affect their happiness. So in this discussion too, what I want to say is none of these emotions ever disappears or ever is gone. It's just that other emotions superimpose themselves over it. So even when we feel happy, it doesn't mean we don't feel failure still or stupid. It's just that call for what's going on in our life or how we want to feel in our life, we might project happiness might just be the volume of that is louder than the volumes of failure, stupid, and or as we talked about in the self-development episode, the defenses that we're using are drowning out those feelings of failure, stupid, overwhelmed. And I can have moments where I look really happy, even though I feel miserable inside. And
Yeah.
that's kind of, just my own story. That was the story of my teenage years. Is I often felt like I had to look happy and I wanted to look happy because I thought people like happy people, whereas inside I was absolutely wounded and feeling just lost and miserable and alone because, the history, my brother's death, and I got bullied a lot and I felt very alone and I felt I had to make everybody else happy and proud and be perfect. So all those things added up, and the level of defenses that I put out in front of that I showed to the world and that I tried to convince myself of, that's where then a lot of that stuff played out for me. So I want people to realize it's all about what we do with these emotions.
Dr. E, I was going to say it's a really interesting way to think about it. The volume, right? Like these emotions can be sounds that are still there, but the happiness volume goes up, sort of drowns out the other emotions, but that doesn't mean they're not there, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's again when we get into the physics. I have a great example of how our defenses work, and I might have touched on this back in the other self-development episode, but I talk about noise canceling and how noise canceling works. So,
can't wait for that.
all right, yeah. So guilt,
pain.
Yep. Guilt lets us know when we've done something to somebody else that we need to fix, rectify, resolve. So in this, well, let me go to the next emotion too, but at its deepest form, it lets us know that we want to remember to love others. And that's really important because often in a hierarchical culture, guilt is used as a weapon. Failure and stupid are used as weapons often. So we got to see why don't we want to show these emotions, express these emotions? Because of the ways we've been taught to use them hierarchically and the ways they've been used on us hierarchically, like I said, like a weapon. So shame.
I'm going to say that is pain-based.
Yep. I call guilt and shame the brothers. And I've referred to this in the past, and I remind it because shame lets us know when we've done something to ourselves we need to fix and rectify. And it's at its deepest level, it's there to let us know that we deserve to love ourselves. It's really important for us to remember to love ourselves. And that's what often we forget. And that's often what we're taught we're not supposed to do. We're often taught in hierarchical worlds, we're supposed to love others before ourselves. And if we love ourselves, truly love ourselves, then that's supposed to be bad. No, it's not. To me, that's what this school is here to teach us to do. Because if we love ourselves, like I went back to equity in episode 2 or 3, I taught about that. If we come to this world loving and respecting ourselves, we will innately and automatically love and respect other people. We are taught to disrespect people because of that fear-based drive of hierarchical models. So that's where shame and guilt are the brothers, and they're often used as weapons in our culture. When we see their purpose and we see that I can love myself and that's okay, and I can love others even though they hurt me, and even though I made a mistake, I can atone for that mistake. And as we talked about in the episode with Wendy Garisco, I talked about that atone separated in 2 words becomes at one. So guilt and shame push us away from others. They also create a separation within ourselves. And when we atone for that, we find the ability to learn to love and accept ourselves. And then we love and accept other people. So continuing on, helplessness.
Helplessness, I'm going to go with fear-based.
Good job. Yep. It lets us know when we need to look for help. So often when we feel help, we're like, help, so we're feeling afraid of what's happening around us, and we don't feel we have the resources within us and or around us to get the help we need. Often people keep that feeling of helplessness inside and don't want to ask for help because they don't want to look weak, because often with helplessness might come failure, because if I'm doing what I should be able to do, then I shouldn't be failing, and I should know better. So we got to look at all these thoughts that come with helplessness. I might feel shame, I might feel guilt, I'm going to probably feel stupid and inadequate. So all these other feelings are coming in. Now we have hopelessness.
I'm going to go with fear-based again.
Okay, so think about this.
Yeah.
The longer that we feel helpless, what happens to that feeling of helplessness? Is it only feel like fear now?
I mean, it could be painful to be helpless and hopeless for that long.
Okay, right. So the more we feel helpless, the more likely we are to feel hopeless. Hopeless to me is pain-based. So these emotions I call the cousins. Guilt and shame are the brothers. They're both pain-based. Helplessness and hopelessness are the cousins. The longer we feel helpless, the more likely we are to feel hopeless. And yes, some people get to that core of hopelessness much more quickly. It comes with other emotions. And I think, again, we have to look at that innate temperament, personality, dynamics, the natural neurochemistry that we might come here with, given our genetics. All these pieces influence our emotions, and our emotions influence that neurochemistry. So hopelessness it never comes alone, because helplessness often comes first. So we fall into hopelessness. And I always say that hopelessness, to me, I visualize my feeling of hopelessness as sitting at the bottom of this big dark hole. There's often despair and failure and stupid and shame and unlovable and unworthy and overwhelmed and confused and doubt. And hope, it's like this ladder that climbs up, that we have to get up to get to that pinhole of light at the top of the hole. And help is saying, come on, let's go. And we feel like we climb that ladder of hope, and we hit a greased rung, and we slide back down, and we land on our rear end again. So that's where hopelessness is like, I give up. So when we talk about learned helplessness, like we talked about in earlier episodes, it's learned helplessness to me is getting to the point of hopelessness where I just give up. And that's, again, differentiating the difference between that fear and pain base. Now, as I mentioned before many times too, the core emotion I see of anxiety is helplessness. Core emotion of depression is hopelessness. And understanding the difference between those and how they're manifested. Now, do they come with other emotions? Absolutely. I'm going to the core, to that emotionally specific nature of those diagnoses. Frustration.
Frustration, I'm going to go with pain.
Okay, right. So frustration to me is banging our head against a door again and again and again. And it hurts after a while.
Okay.
What frustration wants to do is back up. Says back up and look for the door, or back up and see what you're banging your head into. Often frustration, people misunderstand frustration almost as a protective emotion, but they're pairing frustration with anger. We call in anger often when we feel frustration to knock the wall down, rather than look to see how we can solve the problem. So overwhelmed, guess what? It's going to come with frustration. Stupid is often going to come with frustration. So we're seeing a combination of emotions, and why, again, this concept of emotional specificity, as I say, is so important. Doubt.
Doubt, I'm going to say, is a fear-based emotion.
This one is kind of unique, but I would say, yes, it's fear-based, because it says, I need more questions. I can't make a decision. So it's a fear of pain. So it needs more information. So it's often asking more questions. And for doubt, often it can never ask enough questions to feel confidence, because doubt is not confidence. They're different emotions. We want to feel confidence, and the more questions we answer and can feel at peace with, then the more often that we can feel confident, and that's going to come through experience. So remember, wisdom, as I talk about, is the application of knowledge gained through the qualitative interpretation of experience over time. So doubt and wisdom are often going to be connected, because the more I answer those doubts, then the more I'm going to grow with my experience, and the more wise I'm going to feel. And again, qualitative interpretation. Next, we have confusion.
Confusion. Ah, wow. Doubt and confusion sound very similar. Are they cousins too?
They are. I would say they're more like brothers, really, because
Oh,
they're
right.
both
Okay.
fear-based.
Okay.
So they're brothers
Here.
too.
Yeah.
And they are. So confusion says, I need more information to make a decision. So yes, when we feel doubt, I have more questions. Confusion's often asking doubt, ask more questions because I need more information. So you see in the slight differences, yet that different color of kind of the rainbow of these emotions?
Absolutely. And I'm starting to recognize just, the relationships between the two of them. Like you call, guilt and shame brothers, hopelessness and helplessness cousins. I'm seeing, and I guess doubt and confusion, they go hand in hand.
Absolutely. So loneliness lets us know we need like comfort of another. That's a perfectly valuable emotion.
Yeah, that
So
seems pain-based to me. Is that pain-based?
exactly. And in that, we got to recognize that sometimes the place we feel the loneliest is in the middle of a crowd. We can feel alone and feel okay feeling alone. Lonely is the pain aspect of that. Whereas I can feel alone, and that could be almost, that's one that's hard to classify. It almost depends. I would say almost alone is a modifier, and so that's one way to look at it. So, but loneliness is no, it's the pain of feeling separateness and alone. It can come with feeling unloved, abandoned, rejected, neglected, hopeless, helpless, overwhelmed. So again, see all these emotions that are coming with it. Misunderstood.
I think that's pain-based, but I could see how it could be fear-based too.
Yeah, well, we often feel afraid to feel misunderstood. So that's protecting us. But yes, misunderstood is pain-based. It lets us know when we feel like we need to help people understand more. But often when misunderstood comes with fear, we're often scrambling to help people understand us. Misunderstood can often lead to calling on protective emotions, anger, rage, hatred, to protect ourselves when we don't feel understood. Often, why do we feel misunderstood? It's because we're often not understanding ourselves fully. Pride.
Wow. I'm going to go, this is probably wrong, Dr. E, but I'm going to go with love-based.
Yeah, absolutely. And we talk about the 7 deadly sins of pride. That to me isn't the correct translation, that it's a deadly sin. Arrogance to me is the emotion. Pride is when we feel good about who we are. Now, let's say in a hierarchical world, if I'm somebody who wants to be in control and wants power over people, I absolutely want to have a corner in the market on pride and defining who and what and when they should be able to feel pride. And you see people in positions of power who purposely demean people, try to humiliate people to affect their sense of pride so that they don't challenge them, because often with pride comes a sense of power. In an equity way, there's nothing wrong with that. We want to feel proud of who we are and good about who we are. Then guess what? We're going to learn to love ourselves more. And guess what? We're going to treat people more with respect. Now, the next piece that comes with that is confidence. What's that?
Confidence, I'm going love-based as well.
Right. And that's good. That's specific. That's when we feel good about something we can do. That's different than pride. Arrogance is going to be channeled through pride, the false pride, and also a false confidence. So remember, arrogance is protective. It's pain-based, fear-driven. So we see again the intersection. So you could call pride and confidence brothers, and arrogance their cousin. Okay, as we see these relationships,
The whole family, Dr. E.
Yeah, we are working on a
Yeah.
family. And that's where, to me, all these emotions are part of the same family. So emotional modifiers is we're looking at Passion is an intensifier. What does that mean? That passion intensifies a lot of different emotions. I can feel passionate love. I can feel passionate hate. I can feel passionate rage. I can feel passionate fear. I can feel almost passionately sad. So we got to see, I can feel passionately hopeful. So we have to see how sometimes there are concepts almost that are intensifiers that we might see kind of as an emotion, but it really crosses over. Passion to me crosses over into love, fear, and pain. So we can see how those work. Respect is an indicator of how we treat ourselves and other and involves honor and admiration. Admired, we can say we can feel admired, we can feel honored, and are those concepts that help us to feel loved and respected. And so all these kind of can play together, but they modify other emotions of love, of closeness, of pride, of accomplishment. And disrespect will evoke shame and or guilt and or fear and or mistrust. So we see how they're modifying emotions. Honor sets a path to how to treat ourselves and others. So are we treating people with a sense of that gives them due treatment for what they deserve as being a human being, as being a soul in this universe, if we want to take it to there. Truth is a journey that comes with deep understanding. I teach people, and I think we talked about this last week too, and before, that the span between fear and absolute truth is faith. And often we want to say we have absolute truth when we don't. We're often refining our truth and moving closer and closer to absolute truth, or we hope we are. Some people are absolutely moving away from truth, and people want to manipulate truth hierarchically, to use truth as a weapon, to use truth as a tool of power and control, rather than seeking absolute truth. We see things and have seen things through the history of religions and countries and companies and families that say, no, this is not true. This is true. It's true because I say so. Or I'm going to take out what is absolutely true because I want to control the market on what I say is good and strong and right. So we have to see the manipulation of truth, the manipulation of fact, what people have been called, alternative truths, alternative facts. So we want to see how this is being manipulated to affect our perceptions, and perception often is going to affect. It's going to affect fear and pain and love. So integrity defines the manner and alignment of our thoughts, intentions, and actions. Are we in alignment? And one day we'll probably dive a little bit deeper into integrity and how I explain it. We've talked about it multiple times. I do think it is a critical part of our cultures. I think it's been a critical part of our history. It's been a critical part of many establishments. Again, religions, politics, family, businesses. We talked about brand integrity with Wendy Garisco in that. So integrity is a key piece. So there we have it. Is the pieces. Now there are other emotional modifiers, but I wanted to introduce to y'all the idea of what these modifiers are, how they work, and how they affect and influence emotions, because they're not necessarily quite emotions, and yet they have emotional aspects to them. They're almost more concepts that we want to understand more fully in how they affect our emotional algebra. And are they multiplicative, additive? Are they divisive? Are they exponential? Are they logarithmic? And this, again, the product is that the project of this is kind of ambiguous and it's esoteric, while yes, you can almost see how those affect you each individually to figure out how you got here in life and where you want to go.
Yeah, no, and I think it's really helpful the way you sort of pull it all apart, define what's what, right? And drill down into the specificity of each one of those emotions. I can tell you, I mean, as we were going through just the quiz, which I think I got 6 out of 9 correct on, there's some of them are hard to actually differentiate between the two of them. Right. And if you're not even thinking about that on a daily basis, how in touch with these are you really? And so it's good to even just take an examination of them, like what we just did there, and do that at least periodically in your life, I would think. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why I say write it on paper.
Yeah.
Look at the issue or look at the belief system and then start to separate and ferret out each emotions. And as you can see, this is a really short list.
Yeah.
There are thousands of emotions. We talked about love. Sanskrit had 96 different types of love. How many different types of fear are there? How many different types of pain are there? You know, if we want to look at those as unique emotions, and each one is a different frequency. And that's, again, why I want to get into that quantum physics and energy and get into that in a future episode.
Yeah, that too sounds like a really intriguing concept. Can't wait for that one.
Yeah. So
good stuff here, Dr. E. I think very helpful for people. Hopefully, and people can back up and take screenshots, study those graphics Dr. E presented today.
Absolutely.
Before we wrap up, Dr. E, just one last thing. Enjoy your Super Bowl. Super Bowl 10
Absolutely.
It is for you. Is that what it was?
Yummy. Super Bowl 10.
Super Bowl 10. Congratulations. Yeah. That's quite a tradition. And
I think I might give everyone a free cholesterol test on the way out.
I mean, you should be able to indulge for a day, right?
Yeah. Oh, I indulge many days, but try to keep that.
Of course. So enjoy that, and
you enjoy your Eagles. Go Eagles. That's why
right.
I'm in your corner. And now I hope those Eagles fans behave in respectful ways.
I hope so too. I think they will. Most of them will, if they can afford being at the Super Bowl.
Well, let's not hope that the fans start tearing up Philadelphia again.
That's the other thing. I mean, geez, and you heard about the 18-year-old guy who fell from the light pole and died tragically. I mean, geez.
I know.
So yeah, I know.
And again, that's all about power. That's all about look at me and what I can do, and let me feel my power with this win. So it's a misuse of our power to fall into those situations. All right. Well, until next time.